Thanks a lot for being here. Thanks a lot, Schultz and Francis, for the invitation. You may think after, Michael's talk, very data intense and very broad and very empirical and very ambitious. Mine is much, much less ambitious. Mine is basically a fragment of normative reflection. Given the very tight, very common association between polarization and the crisis of democracy, democratic backsliding, you might find that topic, that question slightly strange. It is, so first I have to explain it. And it is my explanation is very much anchored in the piece Schultz just mentioned on polarization, related to my conceptualization of polarization. In my view, the current debate, it started in the US and it spread around the world. It infected comparative political science. We have adopted very, I would say, a very pernicious view of polarization, if you allow me to say so. I think in a very simple manner, I would say the way we talk about polarization today is basically to say, if we have a systematic ideological or policy differences with our adversaries, we're polarized. If we don't like our adversaries, we're polarized, dangerous. We have to worry. And I think the underlying vision of democracy is very much conflict averse. Doesn't understand, I think, the nature of conflict in democracies, and is transpired by ideals of harmony and compromise and moderation. I think we should not propagate. So I think we really need to think hard about when does conflict cross a threshold that really is bad for democracy, that should really be worrying us. And I think that threshold is when it crosses basic democratic norms. So it's either, and that crossing may either be when adversaries start treating each other as political enemies. That's, I think that, yeah. That's the basic hallmark of political intolerance. The others are an existential threat. They're outside our moral community. We shouldn't even listen to them. And it may involve, but need not involve, the use and justification of violence. And the other thing, and that's also a consequence, but an independent part, viewing, describing, treating others not just as political enemies, but as democratic enemies. The idea that the others, our adversaries, are existential threats to liberal democracy. And if you look, the United States is today, it's the epicenter, it's the prototype of polarization today. And if you really watch the way Democrats and Republicans have been debating, viewing each other, it's really the mutual, the reciprocal perception. The other side is overstepping basic democratic rules. They are doing and maybe doing even further harm to democracy. The figures, if you see that these are US figures from last year, and basically it's in the red it's how Democrats, independents, and Republicans view how democratic are the president or general politicians or voters from the other party or from their own party. And the pattern is very simple. We are Democrats, and the other are not. And that's not just we are very much accustomed to see that from our liberal side, and to we are completely certain in our convictions. Yes, Trump and the Republicans, they have broken many democratic formal and informal rules, but we are not quite accustomed to the idea that the liberal side is viewed in very, very similar manner from the conservative, illiberal, in that case, Republican side. So my view of polarization, in a way, continues the Giovanni Sartori classic view on polarization. Sartori thought polarization consists in the presence of openly anti-democratic forces. I think these open, self-declared enemies of democracy that pursue systemic alternatives fascism, communism, they practically don't exist anymore today. So these are suspected enemies of democracy. So and it's the presence of suspected enemies of democracy, not just on the fringes, as a Tory figure did, but within the very mainstream. And in my vocabulary, it's not the place here to develop that. It implies a breakdown of basic democratic trust. So basic players lost the confidence that their adversaries play by basic democratic rules. Okay, which is the connection to subversion? So in the common context, I share, Michael, your kind of long-term view that consolidated, old-term, established democracies are relatively secure, and we, with our political mindset, can kind of emphasize the fact that in probabilistic terms, it's very, very unlikely that countries like, France and Germany and Austria, probably the United States, will go down the hill in a dramatic, long-term, irreversible fashion. I think probabilistically that may be true, but in politics is the art of the possible. We worry about possibilities. Our fear concerns things that might happen. And it's very much like cognitive psychologists tell us, there are some possibilities of bad things that might happen we completely ignore, and others we blow out kind of out of proportion possibly, but we really focus on them and really create our anxieties about them. So in countries like Austria and like Germany, we act under the shadow of the 1930s, and our ongoing task is to prevent and keep preventing Hitler. These are big stakes. And so the idea of we really should be vigilant and kind of identify threats to democracy, the enemies to democracy early on, that's really kind of in our ADN. That's part of how we are, how we perceive ourselves as citizens of these democracy. But if we think about the identification of enemies of democracy as the defining feature of polarization, then we can reframe that duty of vigilance as a duty of polarization, which you may find slightly strange. But if polarization means pointing to the other side and telling them you're threatening democracy, you are playing outside democratic rules, that's a polarizing actor. So democratic vigilance is a polarizing attitude, so to speak. And usually, kind of in political science and often in politics, I think I have to watch we think that that's an easy task, and we have our labels. We have our populists and our anti-pluralists and our authoritarian populists and our illiberal actors and our autocratizing agents, etc. We place labels on them and think that does the job. I think it's easy. We just need to observe what they say and do. I think it's much more difficult. I think we assume or simulate a simplicity that doesn't exist. That's kind of illusionary. There are many, many reasons why we can get it wrong, why we can be wrong about others in trying to discern their democratic commitment. Facts are often less than obvious. Democratic rules are less than obvious. We can make mistakes from concluding from what people do to their democratic convictions. We can never be sure about the minds of others. We can't even be sure about our own subjectivity and our commitments under changing circumstances. People may be inconsistent in their behavior, which makes them difficult to read. People may be ambiguous. They may situate themselves in some gray area of semi-loyalty. They may change. We may believe their change, or we may not. So there's a whole list and a long topic about why we can be wrong. And I think it's important to consider it's not just that we can be wrong about others, but we are ourselves also targets of these assessments, and others can be wrong about ourselves, and we don't want to be that kind of. When others call us, liberal fascists or something, it's kind of annoying. It's kind of we would like to do better. And so the type of mistakes we may commit, it's very simple. Kind of in the identification of democratic enemies, type 1 error. Or let's say type 2 error is the thing we try to avoid. There are enemies around, anti-democratic forces, and we don't spot them. We just miss them. We are too naive. We are too dreaming. That's the thing. We all agree we want to avoid that. And then there are type 1 errors, which is the perfectly fine people around, or probably just shady figures around, and we try to crush them as democratic enemies. False positives. And so on the one side, we would have hypervigilance, too little vigilance, and the other side, hypervigilance. I skipped the part about good and bad faith things, which is important, but my time. Yeah, time is short. How much? 5 minutes? Okay, I can tell you a little bit about. So the idea is generally, fails negatives is really the thing we should be avoiding. It fails positives, probably a bit annoying, but we either ignore them or they don't quite matter. And I think they do matter, and they carry a set of risks. And this is the list: moral, rhetorical, strategic, systemic. And so the first one, the moral risks of getting it wrong. So the first thing, if you tell someone who carries the subjective conviction of being a good Democrat, kind of like myself, we tell them that he or she is really, for example, a liberal fascist. I do find that insulting, unless I just walk away and don't take that person seriously. But it's kind of telling someone you are against democracy. It's kind of the worst insult you can commit within our democratic community. It's really to say you are outside our moral community. You belong, over the park, beyond the railway. And then it's also an act of injustice, because if we do that, kind of democratic enemies of democracy are the only legitimate enemies in a democracy. We always tell each other we need to be, fair and treat adversaries as adversaries, and they are legitimate participant of equal rights. The only opponents we are justified to treat differently are enemies of democracy. We can kind of start ignoring them, stop inviting them, keep them out of spheres of power, out of public debate. So it has practical implications. And so if we do that, if we get it wrong, it's an act of injustice, potentially. Then there are rhetorical risks. One kind of very, very simple thing is if we describe someone as kind of falsely as enemy of democracy and people believe us, I think that should count as a bad thing. It's easier to see on our side. If Donald Trump tells us the Democrats stole the 2020 elections, they are kind of doing really bad stuff. They did bad stuff. They don't recognize the base rule of democracies, and kind of 1/3 of the electorate believes him. We are inclined to think that's a bad thing. And similar things we may say about kind of exaggerated accusations. Kind of that book points to the former Mexican president Andrés Manuel López Obrador. I think his enemies had been calling him out as an authoritarian populist all his life. And at the point when he really started doing kind of crazy stuff, this argument had been running out of steam. So the failure of then there's strategic problems. If we kind of just create a rhetoric citizens or our target audience perceives as hyperbolic, as exaggeration, as not quite real, they may fail to mobilize. Here's just Berlusconi. When he rose, there was a whole kind of culture of calling him out as kind of a new type of media fascist. And he did some nasty stuff, among others, controlling the media. But kind of that fascist hysteria did little to mobilize kind of opposition to him. And if you look at especially the voters of the German Alternative für Deutschland, AfD, they see themselves as targets of false accusations. And here you see really a counter-mobilizing force of these people telling reporters and telling each other, "You're just a normal party. We're just a protest party. Why are you always calling us fascists when we are just little village guys?" So the risk of counter-mobilization. And then the systemic risks of hypervigilance, I really have to conclude. Kind of basic trust and the idea that others play by the rules. This is a huge public good if it's kind of a culture of trust. And giving it away, disrupting it kind of without good reasons, that's a really grave sin. Here's the storm on federal institutions in Brasilia, January 23. That was really the outcome of Bolsonaro denouncing the very reliable, time-tested Brazilian electronic voting system as suspicious. So he really destroyed a situation of equilibrium of trust in a frivolous way, and that's so we should never do that kind of without real good reasons. So just to conclude, in terms of hypervigilance, if you look also in publications, the good thing, if you're really super vigilant, Hitler will not get back. The bad thing is our diagnoses sometimes are so overblown that it seems that he's already back. And with that, I close. Thank you.